The hero's story is often one of cleverness, problem solving, and overcoming immeasurable odds to defeat the villain, but some of animation's most compelling and memorable villains are the ones that match or even excel beyond the intelligence of the hero. These villains don't just pose a physical threat, but an intellectual one. They anticipate, analyze, and outthink the hero, giving them a phenomenal challenge that doesn't always come from fists and weapons. A hero must dig deep and take the battle to a psychological level when the villain is just as smart as the hero. It takes true genius to topple an empire without so much as an invasion or coup, but that's exactly what Scar does in The Lion King. Scar's intelligence in The Lion King is effective because it is embedded directly into the film's writing structure, making him a villain whose victory comes not from dumb luck or circumstance, but by truly being the smartest person or lion in the room. If you were to look at him from a writing perspective, Scar is constructed less like a traditional antagonist and more like a dramatic engine. His plans are not clever twists revealed after the fact, but carefully layered inevitabilities that exploit character psychology and narrative timing.
Well, I suppose you'd have found out sooner or later. You being so clever and all.
The film establishes early that Scar's power does not come from physical dominance. After all, he is visibly weaker than Mufasa. His original name, Taka, can be translated to want or dirt, and he lacks the respect of the pride. It's his acute understanding of emotional manipulation that allows him to get where physicality cannot take him. This is critical to why his intelligence feels earned rather than contrived. The screenplay consistently positions Scar in scenes where he does not act but listens, allowing him to function as a character who gathers information and formulates a plan rather than simply writing him as a simple and flat genius. His intelligence is legible, traceable, and therefore dramatically credible, which already makes him a far more interesting character. What elevates Scar's writing further is how his schemes rely on exploiting existing flaws rather than inventing new obstacles. The plan to eliminate Mufasa and Simba works because the screenplay has planted the holes in the character's armor for Scar to capitalize on. Simba is reckless and desperate for approval, and Mufasa is trusting to a fault when it comes to his brother. In a way, he understands these characters before they're given the chance to truly understand themselves. This is an example of intelligence as interpretation, not invention, which is a hallmark of thoughtful writing. The film never needs to explain Scar's plan in detail because each step emerges organically from prior scenes. His manipulation of Simba in the aftermath of Mufasa's death is especially telling. Scar does not frame Simba with evidence or witnesses, but with guilt. Scar speaks to him sternly, yet gently allowing the emotional weight to do the work. He insinuates Simba's banishment, relying on the gravity of the situation to be the thing that keeps Simba away from the pride for years.
But the king is dead. And if it weren't for you, he'd still be alive.
Scar's intelligence is also written in direct contrast to Simba's arc, which strengthens both characters simultaneously. During Scar's reign, the film shows the consequences of an intelligent villain who lacks the skills of true leadership, a fault that will later come to undo him altogether. The Pride Lands decay not because Scar is incompetent, but because he's self-serving. Simba's eventual victory requires the unraveling of Scar's narrative control rather than a simple physical defeat. Scar's manipulation of truth, his self-perceived grasp over reality itself, is his greatest weapon, and it is only when that narrative collapses that he becomes vulnerable. This doesn't just make for a narratively satisfying undoing, but it allows the climax to feel like a true thematic resolution. The truth is, for how intelligent Scar is, his magnum opus was operating on borrowed time. The alliance he makes with the hyenas is a good idea on paper, vicious muscle to help impose his will, but the hyenas are not loyal because Scar is smart, they're loyal because they are useful, and the moment that utility falters, so does his control. This ensures that Scar's downfall is not the result of sudden stupidity, but because there was no other way this relationship could have gone.
Friends? I thought he said we were the enemy.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Ultimately, Scar stands as one of animation's best written, intelligent villains because of his careful planning and the narrative commitment to exploiting his weaknesses that intelligence can't totally hide. His schemes arise naturally from character dynamics, his victories feel earned through long game planning, and his defeat reinforces the film's thematic argument. Scar can be considered a genius, but when it comes to being a true leader, some kind of moral grounding is required, or else your lasting legacy will be that of hyena food and nothing more. It's one thing to topple an empire, it's another to eradicate the fundamental structure of the world. But that's exactly what Syndrome sets out to do in The Incredibles, forever reshaping a world filled with superheroes and the lowly humans that live amongst them. Syndrome's intelligence in The Incredibles is compelling, not simply because he's a genius inventor, but because the film's writing treats his intellect as a logical extension of the world's thematic concerns rather than a convenient narrative tool. Syndrome is not written as a spontaneous mastermind who magically outthinks the heroes. Instead, his brilliance is procedural and stems from a deeply personal home. Every major beat of his plan is shown to be a long con fueled by one of the most fiery fuels known to man: pettiness.
You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes.
This emphasis on process is what grounds Syndrome's intelligence and makes it feel earned. But it's one thing to simply kill or humiliate someone who wronged you. It's another to completely wipe away the foundation of the world that allowed your enemy to thrive. You gotta be pretty petty to do that, but you also need to have the intelligence to pull it off. From a writing standpoint, Syndrome's intelligence is particularly effective because it is framed in direct ideological opposition to Mr. Incredible's worldview. Bob Parr is a natural. He was literally born to do what he does, while Syndrome is not. Syndrome, by contrast, is written as someone who compensates for what he lacks through obsessive analysis. The screenplay reinforces this difference structurally. Bob's failures often come from acting too quickly and relying on that muscle memory that comes with years of experience, while Syndrome's victories come from preparation. Their first major confrontation ends decisively in Syndrome's favor, not because the hero is suddenly incompetent, but because the villain has already solved the hero as a problem. This is strong writing because it respects both characters simultaneously. Syndrome does not win because Bob is weakened by the plot, but because he has yet to be changed by it.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
What elevates Syndrome beyond a standard evil genius is how explicitly the film connects his intelligence to emotional immaturity. The writing never treats his intellect as inherently villainous. Instead, it treats it as a mismanaged element that can be catastrophic if not handled correctly. Syndrome's plans account for physical strength, superpowers, and even teamwork, but they fail to account for human unpredictability, particularly empathy and self-sacrifice. It's something that can't be quantified by formulas and numbers. It's an anomaly of human nature. Ironically, Bob learns this far sooner than Syndrome, despite the fact that Syndrome is sort of closer to being an actual human than Bob. This is not a flaw introduced at the climax for convenience, it is seeded throughout the film. Syndrome's dialogue reveals a fixation on fairness, recognition, and control. He knows how to build systems, but not how to live within them. From a screenwriting perspective, this distinction allows the story to critique intelligence without devaluing it. Syndrome is right to a certain degree, but like most villains, it's that lack of moral grounding that ultimately keeps him from being what he's always wanted to be. The screenplay also avoids undermining Syndrome's intelligence in defeat, which is a common trap for similar characters. His final loss is not caused by a sudden lapse in judgment or forgotten contingency, but by the flaw of vanity that the film illustrates time and time again will be his undoing. His inability to understand the core concept of a hero outside of surface-level aesthetics is translated poetically into his demise via Turbine, thanks to frequently criticized cape. This is effective writing because it preserves narrative consistency. Syndrome was always traditionally intelligent, but not emotionally. In that sense, his intelligence is well written because it is thematically complete. It drives the plot forward, challenges the hero meaningfully, and collapses under the weight of its own hubris in a way that feels hauntingly inevitable. Some of the greatest instances of hero versus villain occur when both are on similar, if not equal, intellectual footing. One of the clearest examples of this to come out of Disney is with Ratigan, the arch-rival to legendary detective Basil of Baker Street. Ratigan stands out as one of animation's most meticulously intellectual villains precisely because his intelligence is framed as a mirror rather than a contrast. Unlike many antagonists who are simply smarter than everyone else, Ratigan is constructed as Basil's equal in every meaningful cognitive category: deductive reasoning, mechanical ingenuity, theatrical planning, and psychological manipulation. From a writing perspective, this parity is essential. The film does not rely on Ratigan being unpredictably clever, it relies on him being predictably brilliant in ways that directly engage the hero's strengths. This creates a narrative where much of the back and forth is done on the intellectual battlefield rather than the physical one.
A crime to top all crimes, a crime that will live in infamy!
What makes Ratigan's intelligence feel particularly well written is how explicitly it's dramatized through rivalry. The screenplay positions Ratigan not merely as a criminal mastermind, but as someone who defines himself in opposition to Basil. The crime boss designs plans that almost seem like bait on a hook for Basil. His schemes are designed to attract Basil's attention, not evade it. Ratigan's intelligence is performative, rooted in the desire to be recognized as superior. Structurally, Ratigan's plans demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of narrative casualty. His robotic queen plot works because it exploits the assumptions of the society he seeks to overthrow, not because it relies on implausible technology alone. The screenplay takes care to show how each step logically follows from the last, reinforcing the idea that Ratigan thinks in systems rather than impulses. But most importantly, the film also allows Ratigan to anticipate Basil's moves, which prevents the heroes from feeling artificially ahead of the story. This can be seen in the very elaborate trap Ratigan sets for Basil.
Marvelous, isn't it?
The trap is very much tied to Ratigan's intellect, being big, loud, and boisterous compared to Basil's more quiet, analytical intelligence. Of course, Basil manages to work his way around Ratigan's trap, which hints towards why Ratigan will ultimately fail. Basil and Ratigan are intellectual equals, but only in measurements, not in execution. Ratigan ultimately chooses spectacle over precision, and when the prize of attention is ripped away, so too is the facade Ratigan puts on. Ratigan's downfall is shown through a figurative loose thread. Once it's pulled, his entire image begins to unfurl.
Don't say it! You are rat! Ah!
Basil is seen in similar predicaments, questioning his own intelligence and potential, but where Basil finds solace in his newfound friends, Ratigan has no such support system, falling into a feral, animalistic rage when not given the outcome he desires. This works because the film has consistently framed Ratigan's brilliance as conditional. It thrives when controlled and collapses when driven by pride. This is an essential tool in building a dynamic between two intellectual equals, those holes in the armor that allow for the two heroes to come out on top while the villain takes a much-deserved and much-anticipated fall. And when having a villain be the intellectual equal of the hero, it makes sense to not just draw a parallel at their intelligence, but their entire being. This is what makes Grimmel from How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World so interesting, because it's quite clear he's designed to be the polar opposite of Hiccup. Grimmel's intelligence is notable because it is written not as a grand theatrical brilliance, but as a quiet predatory competence that evolves alongside the hero. This is a deliberate tonal choice that distinguishes him from earlier antagonists in the franchise. Where Drago Bloodfist was an antagonist defined by brutal power, Grimmel is an enemy that weaponizes his intellect to confuse and intimidate. Grimmel is not introduced through bombast or spectacle. In fact, his reputation precedes him.
That does sound like a nuisance. But I'm in the business of killing dragons, not retrieving them.
He is responsible for the eradication of all but one of the Night Furies. The film trusts the audience to infer his intelligence from the consequences he leaves behind rather than from the overt demonstrations of genius. This restraint is key to know why his intellect feels grounded and threatening rather than exaggerated. What makes Grimmel particularly well written is how closely his thinking mirrors Hiccup's. Both characters are strategists, planners, and observers of dragon behavior. The screenplay places them on parallel tracks, though with very different outcomes. As boys, both sought the respect of their villages, and when they each were provided with a subdued Night Fury, they made staggeringly different decisions.
When I was a boy and I came upon a Night Fury,
I killed it where it slipped.
This symmetry ensures that Grimmel never feels like an arbitrary escalation of danger. He feels like a natural fallacy that challenges the franchise's intellectual logic. If Hiccup represents intelligence guided by empathy, Grimmel represents intelligence stripped of it. They're mirror images of one another, but it's those traits that exist alongside their intelligence that truly separates the two. But Grimmel's intelligence is ultimately what leads to his downfall. While Hiccup's intelligence sparks humility and humbleness, Grimmel's breeds arrogance. Because of Hiccup's humility, he's smart enough to realize the role humans play in a world of dragons, both for good and for bad. He believes coexistence is possible, but with too many humans out there looking to imprison or wipe out dragons, Hiccup is forced to make the difficult decision to separate from Toothless and the rest of the dragons in order to protect them. On the flip side, Grimmel's arrogance gives him the belief that he is bigger than the greater world of dragons, only caring about how his actions affect himself. This also makes him a hypocrite, as he claims to act for the betterment of the world to protect humankind from dragons.
It would be the undoing of civilization as we know it.
And yet his actions prove to benefit next to no one outside of himself. He trains dragons himself, but does so in a way that reaffirms what he believes. He states that humans and dragons working together is a toxic ideal, unaware that his mindset and methods is what causes the relationship to be different to begin with. He has all the tools to achieve the same glory that Hiccup has gained, yet it's the ego that comes with his intelligence that ultimately keeps him from surviving. Grimmel's intelligence is ultimately written to expose the emotional toll of perpetual dominance. His obsession with eradicating dragons is framed as a need for certainty for a world that can be fully understood and subdued. This makes his defeat less about being outmaneuvered and more about being outgrown. Hiccup's final choice, to let go rather than tighten control, is something Grimmel cannot comprehend. Not because he lacks intelligence, but because his intelligence was never designed to appease anyone but him. From a writing perspective, this is a thematically consistent resolution. Grimmel is defeated by a decision that lies outside his conceptual framework, preserving his intellect while condemning his worldview. He can't imagine living in a world he can't control, and so it's only fitting that he's removed from that world permanently.